Is that all reasonably legible to you? Yeah, I'm trying to be very legible. It's early in the morning. It's probably fairly legible. As the day goes on, probably downhill. So is that big enough for people to read from the back? Okay, I'll do my best. Change of attitudes. Yes, something about this process. Let me just pull a few of these threads together. Something about this process. It is an activity. It is not a state. You never sort of reach the final state of having learned. Yes, in the short run, yes, you learned today in class that 2 + 2 = 4. Great. But what we're talking about is learning is an ongoing process. It's lifelong, actually. One of the themes I want to strike with you is to be human is to learn. You're learning from the moment you're born, really, until the moment you die. You might not seem that way, but it's a constant learning and adjustment to new realities around us. So it is very much an activity, and it's a process, and it's an interactive process between you and teaching, and you and the outside world. So that's a very important word, and ultimately what learning involves is change, and it's going to be a complex form of change, but learning is all about change. To have learned something is to have grown, is to have been transformed, right? So if you think about the church as a learning community, it means that it will be a community where people are being transformed, people are growing. They are not in a state, it is not static, but it is actually very dynamic. It is on the move. And for us as disciples to be true to the name disciple, which means learner, of course, from the Greek, is to be in a constant process, an ongoing process of growth and of change. Right? Growth and change is organic, it is natural, it is part of life, but it's not automatic in the sense that we can choose to open ourselves more to growth and transformation or close ourselves off from it as well. Which is where the attitudinal side here, about attitudes and dispositions and habits, becomes really, really important. So people actually are moved. This is a theme that I was talking about a little bit in the other class that I'm teaching, but it's very much a part of my mindset in coming to this as well, which is people learn and grow, and they are moved to action and to using the knowledge that they have and applying it, putting it into action, if in fact the whole person is engaged, right? It's partially why I like this, what we were given there. The more of the whole person that is engaged, the more deeply transformative the learning is. So if it taps into not only our understanding with our minds, but our habits, our dispositions, our attitudes, our values, right? Then it is more likely to actually take deep root in us, more likely to transform us, and more likely to issue in different kinds of behavior, different kinds of relationships, different ways of living. Okay? That's true in theological terms for a lot of reasons you probably can think about if you think about them biblically, but it's also true in terms of the world of the corporate sphere, right? So if you're doing in a sort of corporate training environment, which many of you have been a part of and will be a part of, and either the learning or teaching side of the equation, the same principles apply. So if your company wants to introduce a new way of doing business, right? It's probably not enough simply to have a lecture where someone explains, well, this is what we're going to do. It's going to be this way. It used to be that way, but now it's going to be this way. We've got a whole different, product or a whole different approach to customer service or whatever it is. I'm just going to sit here and tell you, here's the 10 things that we're going to be doing. Thank you very much. Goodbye. My assumption around that is that very little change will actually take place. Right? If you simply say, okay, we've got to change, we've got to do things totally different, here's the 10 things, end of story, nothing's going to change. Maybe a little bit. But not much is going to change because it hasn't engaged enough of the person to actually make a deep and lasting change. I'm interested in deep and lasting change, which issues in a different way of living, a different way of acting, a different way of behaving, right? I've got theological grounds for thinking that that's the desire, right? But it's also equally applicable to secular context, right? If you're bringing in a whole new way of doing business in your organization, you just don't want people to understand it. You want people to believe it. You want people to value it. You want people to have a good attitude about it. You want them to be motivated about it. And you want them to put it into use and learn how to actually work the thing out. It needs to be applied. It needs to be reinforced that this is really the thing that matters to us. There is a new way of operating, right? And all that's going to be more than just the transmission of information. Information is going to be a baseline. It's going to be very important, but it's not going to go deep enough, right? This is where facts, right? There is a role for facts. There is something important about having core fundamental knowledge of whatever the topic is. But the core fundamental knowledge is not going to go deep enough unless it hits the level of the heart, the emotions, the dispositions, the attitudes, right? So along those lines, so this is a process of change. I'm going to say more about that as we go. And this feature here of this attitude toward the new is a really important point. And are we open, right? This has to do with very personal space. Are we really open to new things? Are we open to change? Are we open to a new way of thinking? Are we open to a new way of behaving, right? So unless someone is really open to this adventure of learning, then not a lot of learning takes place, right? The learner's attitude is going to be really important. The learner's motivation is going to be very important. It's partially why I asked you, why are you here? Right? Why did you come? What brought you out of bed on a Saturday morning when you could have been doing any number of other things? Really pleased to see you, because I thought actually all of the Christians in Singapore were away at a Bible camp, church camp in Malaysia. I thought they were all there, but in fact there's 40 of you left. It's really wonderful. I'm so glad to see you. I thought the whole city was just like empty. But so what? I'm trying to tap into what is your motivation, really? Why are you here? What do you want to learn, right? And if I can connect what I want to say with what you're interested in, then you're more likely to take something away of some lasting value. That's the philosophy behind this, right? So I'm interested in what you think and how what you're thinking here and some of your previous knowledge relates to the new knowledge that I can give you, right? So I'm going to throughout these couple of days, I'm going to reveal some of why I'm doing what I'm doing and the way that we interact, right? So one of them is, just to digress a little bit, not too far though, that one of the things we know about adults and the way that adults learn is that adult learning is maximized if you capitalize on previous knowledge. Okay? So I'm trying to build on what you're currently thinking and what you're currently doing, as well as your motivations, to sort of tap in what is it that you're already thinking about teaching and learning. Because actually you all have ideas in your minds about teaching and learning, quite a lot of it, right? And I want to say that's valuable, right? It's really important, and I want to get inside some of your heads, and as much as we can sort of share our heads together about this, and then build on that, right? So the question about adult learning then becomes, okay, good, you have previous knowledge and that's valuable, and you have things that you can share with me, and I have things I can share with you, and we have things that we can share from the basis of previous knowledge that we have. The trick about adults in particular is, the older we get, the more we like our ideas, and the more settled we get in some of our ways of thinking about things. And one of the great things that I am privileged to be a part of is the life of a remarkable man named Jim Houston, that some of you have met or seen in his travels to Singapore over the years. He was the founding father of Regent College. Some of you are nodding because you know him. He's now 94 years old. And going strong. He looks like he's about 64 and behaves like he's about 34. And this is all true, right? Janet can testify that this is actually true. And so the only thing that tips him off is a wonderful shock of white hair that is worthy of his 94 years. But the amazing thing about him is that he is constantly learning new things, and he is constantly open to new horizons, new topics. He's a professor, so he's a learner, right? To be a professor or a teacher in any way, you have to be a learner. But he's quite remarkable. At 94, I've never seen anybody so open to learning. He's writing 5 different books right at the moment, right? He just did a whole series of lectures last year on the relation between Christianity and Japanese culture. Okay? So, yeah, which he's no great expert on. He just decided to take the previous year and learn about that. And so he's done that. That's becoming a book and all this stuff. So, yeah, that's just what you do when you're 93. You take on this huge, big, ambitious project. So there are certain people who at that age are remarkably open to learning, right? And they're not just repeating their same ideas. They're not stuck in a rut, right? But the trick with adults is, given the strength of previous knowledge, how do you unearth some new grounds for new learning and new attitudes? The other trick about that is some previous knowledge actually isn't knowledge. Some of it is just simply bias. Some of it's just flat out prejudice. And dare I say it, some of it is just wrong. You might call it previous knowledge and you count it as previous knowledge, but actually it doesn't hold much water. Some of what in theological education we do is actually unlearning. Because a number of our students at Regent or a place like BGST come with all kinds of interesting ideas. I'm saying interesting kind of in scare quotes there, that actually don't hold theological water or are bad interpretations of the Bible, and you have to do some unlearning and some relearning along the way. It's a great adventure. I've had many interesting conversations with students trying to talk them out of some really actually heretical views that their church taught them and they were deeply committed to. But I said, no, that's actually a heresy. So for you, it might be previous knowledge, but actually in the light of the church, it's heresy. So what do you do about that? Okay, so the point I'm making is connecting to previous knowledge, very important, very good strategy, and partly what I'm just jumping ahead of myself now in terms of working with any group. It's not just adults, right? It's also children. Children also have previous knowledge, right? You want to build into and tap into that previous knowledge and take it forward another step, right? Add another layer of truth to that. Add another layer of complexity to that. Add a connection between what they know and what they don't know, and gently pull them forward into a realm of further growth and development than where they're at. Right? By the way, I don't really believe that there's a big difference between the way children learn and adults learn. Right? There's a tremendous literature about these questions, and I'm not convinced that anybody has really shown that there's a fundamental difference between children and adults. I particularly, for this course, have been working with a literature that comes out of the world of adult education, which is now a vast area, but really most of it is just learning is learning is learning. And the same sort of principles that apply to children actually apply to adults, and apply to adults apply to children. And I have gone on the record saying that if graduate school were more like kindergarten, we'd actually be better off. Now, when you're the president of a graduate school and you say things like that, your time might soon be coming to an end. I might be unemployed and out selling ice cream on the corner, which wouldn't be a bad thing. But what I mean by that, what do I mean by that? What could I possibly mean by that?